Fuck! God damn it!
I had to do it again. I'm sorry, guys. Oh god, that was that shit's too fucking funny. I had to open up with that again after I did that on last stream. Oh my god. Hey, look, there's a confirmation that we're live. Cool. Yeah, that was I mean, obviously I laughed harder the first time, but that was just because I already explained it last time. I was showing I was doing the minigame for the Chocobo thing, so I could get that last thing for Tidus's Khalid and FF10. I fix the desktop audio volume before we start. But yeah, that was that was from the beginning of Final Fantasy X's stream yesterday. That was 6 hours too. But 2 hours were spent on trying to defeat the stupid Dark Aeon Yojimbo. God damn, that was hard. But we got past it, we got through it, and then the other 4 hours were actual story content, where we finished up everything. But yeah, so we finished FF10 yesterday, and since I'm doing this Final Fantasy Appreciation Marathon by release order, Final Fantasy X, I looked it up, was released in 2001. Forget which month exactly. The next game of the mainline series was Final Fantasy XI, the following year, 2002. So obviously, like I said it before many streams ago, but you can only find random ass lore videos on like the backstory of the expansions as well as just the backstory of the world in and of itself, like the history of the world before you even start playing, like years before the present timeline or whatever, of when you actually start playing FF11 or whatever, like when everything takes place. So you can see like backstory and lore, but that's pretty much it. It's not it's obviously not like Final Fantasy 14 or any single player RPG where it has like the story progression is nothing like those, of course, because if there was, there would be videos like that, but there isn't. All you can find for story stuff in FF11 is literally just random ass lore videos, which is what I found. I found a small playlist that's kind of short-ish. Well, the videos are short, and there's not too many videos too. One of them's like 20 minutes. I might skip it, honestly. But it gives a little bit of, like what I was saying, backstory on the world, backstory on, I think, some of the expansions and what was happening in the story during those. So I'll watch that as well as the... I gotta pull it up. I forgot about that. As well as the cinematic intro for FF11. Let me get that ready really quick. I forgot about that one. Dun, 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 dun. So this is probably going to be a very short stream for Final Fantasy XI. But because I'm obviously going to keep streaming, I'm not going to make the stream short just because of that. I'll put up the BRB screen to cut the video, and that'll be its own... This will be basically its own Final Fantasy XI video. And then after that, we'll just go straight into Final Fantasy X-2, which was released the following year, 2003, a year after FF11. And it's, as the name implies, FF10-2, it's a direct sequel to FF10. And obviously... I don't want to spoil it. Never mind. I was going to say something about the ending of FF10 yesterday, but we'll get there, and I'll talk more about how I'm going to play FF10-2 when we get there too. Okay, so let's see. From this playlist, I have to... You guys might hear some stuff. Actually, let me mute the desktop audio while I get this set up so it doesn't sound like a mess. Okay. Add this to queue. But then it adds a whole playlist, so I have to close it and then do it again. Close player, add to queue again. Just the one fucking video, thank you. And then go back to the other one. And add this whole fucking thing to queue. One at a time, I guess. 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, how am I supposed to add these ones if I can't? How do I move the player out of the way? Oof. 7. Oh, well, great design. So I can't add the last two the last two videos on the playlist because the little button to add them is on the bottom right, where the little mini player is right now. So it's like I can't even add them. I guess I'll have to add them afterwards then. But at least I got the first 6. Or the first 7 videos. I'll add the other 2 when we're done watching these ones, I suppose. If I still want to watch at that point. I might get bored even though these videos are kind of short. Okay, well we'll leave it at that for now. So yeah, I found the cinematic intro and then the lower videos from the playlist I told you about, and I added them all to queue. To my queue, so we'll just watch them from there. And we'll watch till we finish or we get bored, and then we'll move on to 10 too. So, okay, let me unmute desktop audio. And then go back to the actual desktop view. Oh, here it is, Final Fantasy XI opening movie. Now, this game, obviously I just said it came out in 2002. I heard about it, but again, this is back like during the same era as when Resident Evil Outbreak became a thing. Hardly anybody had internet. I was one of those people who didn't. So I wasn't able to like... I couldn't play either one. FF11 or Resident Evil Outbreak, but I wanted to. On my PS2, because I wanted to try it out. I was like, dude, a multiplayer Final Fantasy game? That sounds fucking awesome. Like, you can actually play with other people around the world and, you know, talk about your interests and stuff. I wanted to try it, but I never got to. I finally got a broadband adapter thing, Ethernet thing for the PS2, but by then I was more into Resident Evil Outbreak. I'd kind of gotten past my Final Fantasy phase for that point in my life. Like I said, I played 10 too, but that was pretty much it. I was like, whatever. And by the time 12 came around, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll get it. But by the time I actually bought it and it released and I bought it, the collector's edition and stuff, like I'd gotten into MapleStory at that point, as most of you might know. And so I was just like, fuck 12. I like played halfway through it and gave up. So yeah, I never got to play it, and I'm not going to play it now. Because after MapleStory, I was like, I'll probably never play another MMO again. It's too time consuming. But I got, you know, I got allured, or lured into 14 when I got when I heard about Gunbreaker, and because, you know, Squall fanboy over here. When I heard about Gunbreaker, you know, when Shadowbringers was released, I was like, dude, I kind of want to play it now, you know? I was like, fuck, I'm gonna get sucked in. And then a year later, once COVID started, I was like, well, might as well now. I was like, if there was a better time to get into an MMO, I guess it's while everybody's trapped in their house because of the pandemic, so. And so that's why I got into FF14. I don't think if it wasn't for COVID, I probably never would have gotten into 14. Even though I was already attracted to the idea of Gunbreaker and everything. But yeah, so... And then, you know, once I started playing it, I saw that the storyline progresses like a single-player RPG, which is really fucking cool. And, but you still have the option of playing with your friends when it comes to all the extra side content and even some of the main story content when you have to do a dungeon or a trial. So, you know, you still get the social aspect. It's like a very good balance. Like, you can actually progress through the story on your own, at your own pace. You don't have to team up with your friends. And then, you know, when you want to play with your friends, there's plenty of content for that as well. I think it's a really cool balance. But this video is not about 14, so I'm just kind of going into my own personal history with MMOs. But I thought it was literally going to be like MapleStory all over again. It's just this endless grind. That's what this game is. This is one of the pioneer MMOs that kind of continued or built upon that tradition, because obviously it's not the first MMO, I'm not saying that. There was, I think before this came EverQuest, in terms of popular MMORPGs. Like EverQuest, I don't know if RuneScape was before FF11 too or not. And World of Warcraft was after FF11, which explains why FF11 was so successful, because World of Warcraft hadn't become a thing yet. Because we all know that game took over the 2000s era for MMOs like a nuclear bomb. It just... That became the only MMO people talked about once it released and, you know, became popular very fucking fast. If you ever said the term MMO in front of anybody who wasn't like very familiar with video games, that's the first thing they would think of, would be World of Warcraft. But because this game came out before that, this game was wildly successful, and it made Square Enix a ton of profit, and their ego went through the fucking roof, which is why I think the quality in their game started dipping with 12 and then 13, and then finally 14 1.0, which was an epic disaster. And I'm not just talking out of my... I'm getting to this information about this, you know, the whole thing, their ego inflating and them, the quality of their games dipping. It's basically from the FF14 documentary, where they talk about how they turned things around when they created Realm Reborn. Basically remade FF14 after 1.0's failure. So that's where I'm getting most of this. And I'll probably show a little bit of that once we get to 14. I might show a little bit of that documentary. Not too much, but a little bit. But so yeah, this game was wildly successful, but like I said, it's a very traditional MMO. Back then, this was the thing, was make it grindy as fuck. Just like MapleStory. I thought MapleStory was its own kind, but then I later found out that World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XI pretty much started off the same way. Super fucking grindy. When you die, you lose EXP. It's fucking awful. I was like, dude, which is why I swore not to get into an MMO again, but 14 was different enough that I changed my mind, thankfully. And this other MMO that I discovered alongside MapleStory years ago, called Dungeon Fighter, they upgraded it enough to make it like 14 in the sense where you follow a linear cinematic story. You don't have to party with people to get through the story, just like with 14, and it's not like super grindy anymore like it kind of used to be, though it wasn't as bad as MapleStory, but it was when I first played Dungeon Fighter. And so I thought, hey, maybe 14's like this, and yeah, I was right. A much better version, but I still like Dungeon Fighter, but that's because of the different playstyle. But yeah, Dungeon Fighter definitely took a cue from 14 at some point by the time I started playing it, because yeah, like I said, the story progression is very similar to 14. You can do it all on your own, and then just do the extra content with your friends. So yeah, FF11. I've only seen very, very small bits and portions of this game. I've never seen the cinematic intro. It's gonna be my first time right here, and I don't know what to think. It's gonna be my first time seeing any lore for it too. For the little playlist that I should show it too here in the queue. I found this playlist from this YouTube channel called The Mog House, and they made this small playlist called Tales from Vana'diel, the lore and history of Final Fantasy XI, and then it ties into the expansions that came out for it. So, without further ado, let's get going. I'll do an audio check here. Okay, it's working.
It all began with a stone, or so the legend says. In ages past, a sentient...
I'm actually going to raise the desktop audio volume really high, because I just realized this is really quiet compared to when I play a game. So let me start the video over at max desktop audio volume. So I obviously won't be commenting too much anyway, but if I do, I'll pause it so you can hear me, because you won't be able to hear me over it now that it's at max volume.
Jewel, enormous... It all began with a stone, or so the legend says. In ages past, a sentient jewel, enormous and beautiful, banished the darkness. Its many-colored light filled the world with life and brought forth mighty gods. Bathed in that light, the world entered an age of bliss, until after a time, the gods fell into slumber. That world was called Vana'diel. In the 863rd year of the Crystal Era, Vana'diel was in the midst of a great war. Faced with invasion by the Shadow Lord and his hordes of beastmen, the leaders of the enlightened peoples united their forces in desperate alliance. They were the Kingdom of Sandoria, the Republic of Bastion, the Federation of Winders, and the Grand Duchy of Juno. Together, they struggled for survival in battle after battle as chaos engulfed the land.
Feels so much like Lord of the Rings right here.
Aldo, listen. You've got to climb.
Sis?
Can you lower yourself down?
I think so. Sis, are you alright? Emmeline?
Aldo, just run!
Emmeline?
Man, that was tragic, dude. Holy shit. Came out of the gate swinging this game. Got dark real fast. 20 years later. Back in like his early to mid-20s. It's a hell of an intro, dude. Even for back then, I did not expect that. Got some good quality shit.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Mog House, where today we're taking our first steps into the lore and history of Final Fantasy XI. In this video, I'd like to share with you the creation myth, as it's something everyone who has ever played Final Fantasy XI knows at least the first line of. After all,
It all began with a stone, or so the legend says.
now note the title of this video, Creation Myth. Much like in real life, history has a
This is the Tales from Vanity lore thing, so... Forgot the intro because, you know, in the playlist it went straight into it, but... that was just the cinematic opening movie for the game that we just saw.
way of being exaggerated or changed in a way that makes the story somewhat better for those telling it or hearing it. Whether that's because there's some comfort in a complete fabrication, or maybe protection from the real truth, I don't know. However, I think it's important that the myth exists, as it does play a role for story content down the line and impacts character motivations within those story arcs. Remember, this is also the player's initial knowledge, before the true history is revealed.
That's true. We just saw the opening, and he just showed a clip of it. That all started with that crystal that they call the stone, created everything, apparently. And real quick before we get too far into this is now... The other one was the official FF11 YouTube channel. This is the Mog House, so just want to give credit to the YouTube videos that we're about to watch.
And you might be thinking that everything about this story is a lie. It isn't, it's just not the whole truth. So, it all began with a stone, a giant sentient jewel which created all life and banished the darkness. The jewel brought into life the gods. These gods are beings that are said to have infinite power, two of which we know as Altana and Promethea. The gods created the world of Vana'diel, a paradise in which they and their children played. After much time had passed, the gods fell into slumber. But while the parents gods slept, however, their children continued to play and create their own civilization, known as the Ancients. The Ancients, not content with just living and inhabiting the world, wished to ascend and join their godparents in paradise. This is basically a huge no-no. Paradise was only meant for the gods after all. So the Holy Gatekeeper destroyed their path and cast their homes to the bottom of the sea. Altana, who was in slumber during this whole ordeal, wakes up to find her cherished Vana'diel in ruins. Distraught, the Dawn Goddess, a god of light, happiness and joy, experiences, probably for the first time, true sadness. She cries for the world. Her tears repair the damage done to Vana'diel, and 5 divine tears fall onto the repaired lands, and each tear gives birth to a new race of people. The Hume, the Galka, the Elven, the Mithra and the Taru Taru, collectively known as the Enlightened Races. Now at peace once more, Altana leaves Vana'diel to grow in peace and harmony. Unfortunately, Altana was not aware that Promethea, god of twilight, watched her from the shadows. Dismayed that Altana had not learnt from the children's mistakes and angered by her actions, Promethea set about to curse Altana's newly created races to constant internal conflict by bringing out their worst traits, those being the Hume's apathy, the Galka rage, the Elven arrogance, Mithra's envy, and the cowardice of Taru Taru. That sound familiar? Now you know where the key items for the high tier Archangel battles get their names. To further ensure that Altana's work would not lead to another attempt by people to reach paradise, Promethea created races of his own. Collectively known as the Beastmen, these races were put in place to war with the Enlightened races and occupy their minds, for if they were constantly at war, there would be little time to think of entering paradise. And this is the world that the player enters. They choose one of the 5 races to be, and they are instantly put into this war against the Beastmen. However, this doesn't tell the whole story, and in the next video, we'll get into the real history of Vana'diel. But for now, I'd like to leave you with this little chunk of lore from Final Fantasy XI, and I will see you in the next video. Take it easy.
Wow. The difference between his voice... Hold on. The difference between his voice and then the volume of his intro and outro music is tremendous. So I apologize if that's like blasting you, because it's blasting me. I'm like, holy shit, dude. The audio balance is not that good. But I wanted to comment really quick on what he said. The tale of Altana and Promethea gives me the same vibes as like Hydaelyn and Zodiark. Like this duality of the 2 main gods that created everything, or had a hand in it, in the creation of everything at the beginning of time or whatever. And then, oh yeah, then there's the beast tribe thing that he said that Promethea made to keep the human races, or the enlightened races as they call them, occupied, so they wouldn't try to reach the realm of the gods again. That's interesting. It's starting to feel like and I think I'm gonna get this vibe more and more as we go on, but like, it's starting to feel like FF14 is almost like a remake of FF11, because even the races are somewhat similar to the ones that are in 14. They're just a little different. Like the Mithra or whatever are like the Mikote and the Taru, I think he's called them, right? I might get the name wrong. Like the Lalafels, you know, so on. But yeah, I'm gonna try my best to balance the audio. I might raise and lower the volume on my Streamlabs OBS, but I'm just gonna try to keep it going. I'm just gonna try to keep it going, is what I said. Sorry, I know that's loud.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Mog House, where today we are continuing the journey through the
How
lore
quiet
and
he is
history of
compared to...
Vana'diel. In the last episode, we talked about the creation myth, in which the children of the gods created a race of their own known as the Ancients. Well, the real history does play off this somewhat. Following Vana'diel's creation, but before the rise of the 5 races, there existed 2 peoples, the Cthulhu and the Zilart. The Cthulhu were a live and let live type of people, in tune with nature, and would choose peace over war 99 times out of 100. Led by their leader Graviton, this civilization created 3 great cities. One in Saruta Baruta, now known as the Horotoro Ruins, another in the north of Busadine Glacier, and finally the Temple of Ugalith. The Zilart, on the other hand, were extremely powerful and extremely power hungry. Although there were far fewer Zilart than that of the Cthulhu, the Zilart's power was unmatched even against the strongest Cthulhu. Outside of these 2 major civilizations, there were the Dawn Maidens. They were a group of women who were said to be directly connected to the gods, especially Altana. Now, remember in the creation myth the Holy Gatekeeper stopped the ancients from entering paradise? Well, the Dawn Maidens were led by Eve Noyle, who in legend held the keys to paradise and was a powerful gatekeeper. Back to the Zilart, led by the brothers Aldnarch and Camlanart. The Zilart went on a mad crusade, attempting to reach the skies to harness the power of the gods, including Altana herself, and gain entrance to paradise. Using both the Cthulhu and Dawn Maidens as slaves, the Zilart began the construction of Tulia, a massive floating city, a testament of their power, which would act as the capital of the Zilart people and allow them to gain unlimited power. The brothers constructed the Palace of Fei Yin, which was a control station for this project, along with 3 massive pillars connected by conduits. These are the 3 crags, Holler, Dem and Mir, and Drogorogra's spine. A power core was created on Qufim Island, which would power the city's ability to float in the sky. And finally, the gateway to the gods was created, Ro Maeve. Using the power of Eve Noyle and her fellow Dawn Maidens as the key to their power source, the Zilart believed paradise was within their reach. However, Eve Noyle sent her Dawn Maidens to meet with the Cthulhu in order to form a plan to put a stop to the Zilart and prevent them from entering paradise against the will of the gods. So, with the combined effort of the Cthulhu and the Dawn Maidens, they launched an attack on the Palace of Fei Yin and overloaded the control center, which resulted in a massive explosion that almost destroyed the entire planet. The backup of the power flow through the conduits sent shockwaves across the entire world, and the fallout was cataclysmic. The Northlands were turned from lush green forests into barren wastelands we now know as Zargabad and the Busadine Glacier. The Cthulhu who weren't killed in the raid were slowly warped over time into the race we now know as the Tombury. The Dawn Maidens, who were all killed in the blast, were blessed with a ghost-like afterlife to protect and watch over the Gatekeeper and her future reincarnations, which kinda make them sound like Force ghosts from Star Wars. The Zilart, with their dreams in tatters and now a much lower population, saw the error in their ways and sought to bring peace back to the world in which they had destroyed. The fate of the power-hungry brothers, Aldnarch and Camlanart, remained unknown at this stage, but, spoiler alert, they survived. And this concludes the fall of the Zilart. I hope you enjoyed it, and in the next episode we take a look at the rise of the Beastmen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.
I like that he adds a little bit of humor to it. A little doge. Makes it a little bit more entertaining.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Mog House, where today we are continuing our journey through the lore and history of Vana'diel. At the end of the last episode, Vana'diel was left in a bit of a mess after the Cthulhu and the Dawn Maidens put a stop to the Zilart's plans of entering paradise and gaining the power of the gods. So, following the explosion, the Zilart are severely reduced in numbers, the remaining Cthulhu are being walked into Tombury, and the Dawn Maidens are all dead, but have some sort of spirit form. But the effects of this magical explosion didn't end there. It also slowly changed other creatures into the races that we know today. And the first races to rise from the ashes were the Beastmen, and they thrived in this era of darkness. Now I will dedicate a video going in depth into each race in the future, but for now it's just important to know who is where because basically they own Vana'diel. So there are about 6 major Beastmen races, but there are 3 that are the largest. Starting with the Orcs. The Orcs were bloodthirsty and war-hungry creatures. Their homeland were the dark forests of the northern Quan continent. The Yugudu were a bird-like race which prided itself on its religious connection to the gods. But although they were religious in nature, they weren't all loving, benevolent creatures. They were more of a fanatical evil cult. The last are the Quiddav, which are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle-like creatures. Seeking precious things like ores and minerals, they grew to become miners and made their homes in the swamps of southern Quan. There were more Beastmen which grew in other parts of the world as well. To the islands of the southwest, the mighty Antiken came to power, creating massive catacombs beneath the island chains. Although I won't go into the Antiken in much detail today, it is said that far beneath the sands, far deeper than we've ever seen in the game, is a huge number of Antiken, possibly in a stasis-like state, that could have won the Crystal War either for the Beastmen or themselves if they had entered the fray. Often overlooked, the Antiken are seriously badass. Anyway, getting off track. The far north islands were home to a giant race of beasts called Gygas, and finally the last and much smaller race was the Sahagins. These fishmen lived in the caves and waters off the coast of the southeastern islands.
The Sahagins.
Together, these 6 races grew in size and
Gigas.
number, and soon controlled the majority of the known lands of Vana'diel.
It's nice to hear other people's pronunciation of these, you know, the Sahagin and the Gigas. He called them Gygas, and I couldn't understand what he said for Sahagins.
But of course, the universe has a way of balancing itself,
It's interesting.
and there was light in this era of darkness. Over time, 3 new races fought back against the Beastmen hordes, the first of which were the Galka, a race blessed with hulking, powerful physiques and sheer brute strength. The Galka were the first race to set up camp and create a civilization on Vana'diel. Unfortunately, they chose to set up a massive city centered in the Quots Island region, and when I say massive, it's spread across the entire island. Completely oblivious to the threat below them, the Galka were happy with themselves and their city. The Antiken below them, however, not so much. The ant-like race decided enough was enough with these surface dwellers and completely destroyed the Galka and their city. The Galka survivors were forced to flee through the ancient Koroloka tunnel near their destroyed city, in hopes to discover a new home, which of course they did. On the other side of that tunnel are the Zura mines and their current capital, Bastok. The second race to emerge was the Mithra. These enigmatic, almost feline-like creatures were very quick and cerebral warriors. As the male population of the Mithra was extremely low in comparison to that of the female, the men stayed home to raise children, while the women formed the political and warrior classes. The Mithra built a relatively small society on the Elshimo island, and although they fought many battles with the Beastmen, they rarely initiated the conflict themselves, protecting themselves seemingly all they were interested in rather than conquering their enemies. Over time, the Beastmen attack decreased. It appeared that while they weren't at peace with each other, the Beastmen of Elshimo island had an understanding with the Mithra. And finally we come to the Tarutaru. Not blessed with the strength of the Galka or speed and agility of the Mithra, the Tarutaru were highly intelligent. Sure, they would fight as hard as they could when necessary, but in truth, they feared the Beastmen hordes. So they basically ran and ran and ran some more. The little guys were taking losses left, right and centre, so you can't blame them for desperately seeking somewhere they could find peace. Eventually, after much searching, they came across an uncharted land which they renamed Windurst, and built a safe place for their people to thrive. Several decades later, a young Taru girl, exploring the mysterious towers scattered across the outskirts of Windurst, lost her way and she came into contact with the last of the Zilat race. She was led to the Full Moon Well, where the power of magic was bestowed upon her and the Tarutaru race. It was at this time she was given the magical Book of the Gods, and had a vision of the future in which she saw the life of the Taru Taru for hundreds and hundreds of years in the future. This girl would become the first Star Sibyl. She and her people would continue to study the magical gift that had been bestowed upon them in order to harness its power, which would see the beginning of a new era, the Great Age of Magic. And this is where we leave the story for now, and we will bring this video to a close. In the next episode we will briefly get into the Age of Magic itself. But for now, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Take care.
Headphone warning. Well, there you go. I'm not sure where they got Tataru's name from in number 14. From the old Taru race. And
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Log House, and we're back with another episode of Tales from Vana'diel. In the last episode we skimmed through the Age of Beasts, and by the end the first Star Sibyl of the Taru Taru was blessed with the power of magic. The first Star Sibyl, whose name was Rimilala, whom the R-Stripe Shell currency piece is named after, heads back to Windurst and shares her knowledge, so the Taru Taru now have magic. And although the Taru Taru inhabit the country of Windurst, they are not a united people, and are split into several tribes that individually govern themselves. But even so, with the power of magic, they can now fight back instead of running, and win several big battles against the Yugudu. With the gift of magic, the once picked on little guy is slowly growing into the major force in Vana'diel. However, I must stress again, they are not a united people. The gift of magic only escalated the tensions between the tribes. Several years pass, and two key players are born: Duda, a Qudav, and Tukuku, a Taru Taru. Tukuku was blessed with an affinity with magic. At age 3, she unconsciously cast her first black magic spell and incinerated her family home. She went on to serve as an apprentice scribe under the Star Sibyl, who was now Tabilolo. I know, some of the Taru Taru names are ridiculous, and I apologise if I'm butchering the pronunciation of them. When Tabilolo passes away, Tukuku becomes the new Star Sibyl, but the tribes are so divided at this point that no Taru Taru chieftains attend the rite of succession. In fact, the tribes are now all but at full-blown war with one another. That is, until Tukuku arrives at the site of a major battle between two of the tribes. She casts a powerful AoE stun on both sides of the conflict and completely stops the battle. She then gathers the chieftain of the Taru Taru tribes, and after 3 days and nights of negotiating, they unite under the Federation of Windurst. Unfortunately, Tukuku passes away a few years later. As for Duda of the Qudav, he was born before Tukuku, and he's not your typical Qudav. He was light-mannered and more interested in books and climbing trees as a youth, and he shed his shell, which most Quadavs take great pride in. Although he was part of the royal bloodline, he was never actually expected to become king, but he became this great fortune teller whose readings were extremely accurate, and so eventually his reputation grew and grew, and he was named heir to the throne and became king. During Tukuku's lifetime, but just shortly before the formation of the Federation of Windurst, Duda defeated the Cormlord, an elven tribe in the Durflin region. The elven race, who had started to emerge during the Age of Magic, are nothing special at this stage. They've just lost this battle with the Qudav, and things are only going to get worse for them before it gets better. Despite his victory, Duda decided to abandon the fertile soil he had conquered and instead chose to settle in the barren Pashang marshlands and began the construction of Bedoe. Heading back to the Taru Taru and following Tukuku's death, Lungo Nango is born. As he grows up, Lungo Nango discovers his talents as a beastmaster and becomes a combat caster following a fallout with Windurst School of Magic. With a growing reputation, he is promoted to the position of Master Caster and Magistrate over the region of Norvalan. This is where many of the elven tribes hunt, and as the Taru Taru see the elvens as nothing more than savages, Lungo Nango petitions to the Parliament of Patriarchs for the subjugation of the elven tribes who had laid waste to the Norvalan region. He builds an army to deal with the elven insurgents, and following countless victories in battles across many areas of the Quan continent, Lungo Nango receives the title of Warlock Warlord. The Warlock Warlord is the military leader for Windurst. As Warlock Warlord, Lungo Nango conquers the Quan continent, but his tenure as Warlock Warlord is short-lived, as the Parliament of Patriarchs accuses Lungo Nango of insubordination and removes him from post. He disappears from the public eye in a state of despondency. After all, he had led Witness to greatness and was simply cast aside. After his death, the mages of Windurst narrow their research to the study of pure magic, and Lungo Nango's magical martial tactics were all but forgotten. During Lungo Nango's rise to power, the Mithra, uncontent with their life of solitude on the Elshimo Islands, were hearing tales of strange magical beings from the Elder Mithra scouts, so they decided to venture out into the ocean to see it for themselves. The chieftainess, angered by this disregard for tradition, condemned these actions, stating any who left in search of this knowledge would not be permitted to return. This did not stop the adventure-seeking youth of the Mithra, who set off on their journey and eventually arrived at Windurst. Their strength and tactical skills would prove useful to the physically weaker Taru Taru. It was a duly beneficial arrangement. The Mithra would be allowed to live in Windurst with Taru protection and magics, and in return they would serve as foot soldiers of the Taru military. Together they carved and built the town of Mara into the cliffs overlooking the sea. It was a reminder to the Mithra that their home was not so far away after all. Mara, though always a small town in nature, would become a special place in the hearts of Mithra in Windurst. So now the Taru Taru, with their knowledge of magics and their Mithran friends, pretty much have the Quan continent conquered, but not Pashao marshlands. The Quadav lure the Windurst armies onto their turf, which, even with home advantage, would be risky. Windurst is the dominant force at this point after all. But the Quadav weren't going to fight against the armies of Windurst alone. Prior to this, Chief Lanfair Doragi of the Sandorian Elven tribe travels to Bordeaux to meet King Dudar, and forms an alliance between the Sandorian tribe and the Quadav. The army of Windurst finds themselves surrounded by the allied forces of the Elven and Quadav and are defeated. Following the battle, the kingdom of Sandoria is established, and Lanfair Doragi is named its first ruler. The knowledge of magic itself has slowly but surely been spreading beyond just the Taru Taru. With powerful magic now being used by beastmen as well, the playing field has been levelled, and so the Taru Taru return to Windurst out of fear and regret and enter this long era of isolation. They close their borders off to everyone except the Mithra, and so this once proud civilization becomes more and more out of touch with the rest of the world. And that is where we come to an end to the Age of Magic, and the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you next time. Take care.
All coming together, huh? Now we see the Kingdom of Sandoria, which is prominent in the main game, of course. It's like... I was gonna say, it's like this dude's sense of humor is not too different from mine. So when he showed the alliance between the two people, he showed that clip from Predator, man. I think I've referenced that a few times on my stream already. Dylan, you son of a bitch! And then I just happened to find it here. That's pretty cool. I didn't expect to see a clip of that here.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Mog House for a short and sweet midweek bonus episode of Tales from Vana'diel, the origin of the Porugo. Now, this mostly takes place towards the end of the Age of Magic, but it didn't seem to fit anywhere in the previous video. So I figured I'd do a very short video on its own. Don't worry, the next full episode will be dropping this weekend. So, Samariri is a Taru Taru girl who's born in Windurst, and as a young child she begins to feel sorry for all the toads that get trampled on the paths of Windurst. One day, she decides to use a forbidden black magic spell on these toads that allow them to grow and walk on 2 feet. For this, Samariri is dubbed the Frog Princess.
Unfortunately, this got a little bit out of hand, as not only did Windurst now have Perogo walking around Windurst, the toads learned to talk and even began to cast magic. Panic ensues to the point that the army has to intervene and rid Windurst of the toad beastmen. The army was successful in driving them from the city, but failed to completely wipe them out. For a long time they were thought to have been extinct, but they have resurfaced and joined forces with the Mamuljar savages, presumably seeking revenge against Windurst. That's why you can still see them in the game in the modern day, but also, if you travel back to the past, you can see a group of Perogo just outside Windurst, which is a nice little touch. Anyway,
You could time travel in this fucking game? That's awesome!
I thought this was a quite interesting little origin story, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you very soon for the next full episode. Take care.
He says as he forgets that there was a story segment in Maple Story where you could time travel into the future.
Greetings one and all, and welcome to another episode of Tales from Vana'diel. In the last episode we went through the Age of Magic, and by the end the Taru Taru had isolated themselves in Windurst, and their monopoly over magic was no more. Magic was now being used across the lands by beastmen and enlightened races alike. The Elven had formed the Kingdom of Sendoria, and, now fortified with the power of magic, created an incredibly powerful and extremely well organised army. Like the Taru Taru before them, unfortunately they sought to use these strengths to command and conquer the lands. They sought revenge against the Taru Taru who had conquered them before, and now their arrogance really began to show. Seeing themselves as a superior race entitled to the lands of Vana'diel, they laid waste to beastmen strongholds and Taru Taru villages. The Elven now rule the northern regions of the Quan continent, and wish to conquer the south. Across the sea in the lands of the Near East, a Hume boy is born, Maya. As a youth, Maya hears about the riches to be had on the Quan continent, and stows away on his ship headed for these shores. He becomes a hugely successful miner, and his tireless excavations in the Guskum mines earn him the nickname of Iron Man Maya. As the Elven venture south, Maya's wife is one of the casualties of their conquest, and so Maya lays down his pickaxe and picks up a sword. With his Galka friend Dala, Maya forms his own group of soldiers to take down the Elven invaders. They devised a plan wherein they would skirmish briefly with the Elven knights while gradually retreating, leading them into the depths of the canyons. When they finally had the knights under the great waterfall, they lured them into a thin passageway and blocked them inside it. All at once, crossbowmen from the cliffs above rained down bolts upon the hapless unit. Half the Elven knights were killed and over 100 more were taken prisoner. Of the Bastokan forces, only 47 people were injured or killed, making this a decisive victory for Bastok in the pages of history. The Royal Knights of the Elven had been something to be feared until now, but with this victory the people rallied under Iron Man Maya and his reputation was boosted immensely. The Hume and the Galka gather together and 3 flags are raised upon a hill. They represent freedom, victory and unity. Maya ascends of Bastok shook, but they were quickly silenced by Maya's friend Dala, the Galka. After a brief silence, Dala let out a thunderous roar, shouting Maya for president, and the people cheered in agreement. The Republic of Bastok was born, and Maya was its first president. After being elected as president for life, Maya sets about forging diplomatic relations with the other countries and drafts the constitution of the Republic of Bastok. Peace is a strong word, but the Elven Crusade is at least on hold for now. Dala, the Galka warrior, on the other hand, becomes the first commander of the newly formed Department of Defense. However, just 9 years after being elected, Maya was assassinated by an unknown Galkan youth, and Eroman succeeds him as the second president of Bastok. On an interesting side note, remember the king of the Kudar from the last video? Well, Ludar, realizing that his death was imminent, orders his policies for the next 100 years to be carved onto his gravestone as an epitaph, and so he actually continued to reign for nearly 20 years after he'd actually died. The Kudav were not actually aware he was dead. Eventually though, a Kudav named Vogo infiltrated the king's chambers and usurped the throne. Vogo destroyed Dudar's epitaphs, whose insanely long reign was finally at an end. Back to the Elven, and some 50 plus years have passed since President Maya was killed. The Elven Crusade that was on hold was about to resume. Ashurfage Doragi, the fourth son of Resfiel Doragi, the current Elven king, kills his own stepbrother, who was potentially a contender to becoming the next king, and takes the throne for himself. I've not been able to find the exact cause of death for King Resfiel, only that he witnessed Ashurfage murder his stepbrother and passed away shortly afterwards. Unlike his father, who concentrated on domestic affairs, Ashurfage focused his efforts on war, leading campaigns against foes such as the Orcs and the remaining armies of Windurst. His conquest against the Orcs being perhaps the most notable victory that he personally oversaw. Arriving in Uligarand range, he joined up with some soldiers who had been stationed there in the remote region, and using the height difference to his advantage, Ashurfage was easily able to defeat the invading Orcs. He then flung 1,000 Orcish soldiers from the cliff to their deaths, obtaining a decisive victory. In his short life, he fought in 33 battles across the known lands of Vana'diel, and was feared by enemies and allies alike, and was known as the War King. He was beloved by the knights and the soldiers of Sandoria, but the aristocrats were not as impressed by his war efforts. Despite this, he continued to push Sandoria south, eventually claiming most of the Quan continent, including lands to the southeast that were once owned by the Federation of Windurst. But unfortunately for the Elven, this is where the Crusade starts to take a turn for the worse. Firstly, the Federation of Windurst form an alliance with their bitter enemies the Yagudu, and together they are able to defeat the eastern army of Sandoria. To the west, the Elven battle the Republic of Bastok in the First Battle of Kronstadt. The Elven are victorious, but it's somewhat of a hollow victory as they suffer huge losses. Ashurfage returns as a hero once more, but a few years later suddenly dies at the age of just 25. Rumours of foul play by the aristocrats ran rampant through Sandoria, but his cause of death is cited as complications with wounds suffered across the many battles he was a part of. Ashurfage's successors to the throne were far less war-hungry, and so for over 100 years Sandoria tried to recover from its losses without waging war against everyone. They even sold mining rights to their various territories for the Gold Musketeers of Bastok to survey and excavate. It was a reasonably peaceful time, until yet another Elven king ascended to the throne. One who wished to follow in Ashurfage's footsteps. But for now, we'll leave it there, and in the next video we'll dive into the Second Battle of Kronstadt and conclude the Age of Power. I hope you enjoyed this.
He's doing his outro now. I like the logo for FF11 because everything we're learning right now about the lore behind it really summarizes how it's basically a world in which is in perpetual state of war, basically. It gives off, you know, Lord of the Ring vibes. with the cinematic intro, but then also like with everything that's going, all the political stuff happening. Same thing.
Entry in the series, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.
That's something Square has always done pretty well, is they make the logo of any particular Final Fantasy game really represent the overall theme of it, you know? Like, for example, FF10's logo was a little, like, splash art, I guess, was Yuna performing, like, ascending, you know? So... And of course, Yuna's performing Ascending. I should have followed up with that because, you know, the whole thing revolves around death. All of FF10, the spiral of death and all that. And then, you know, FF7, the meteor. Big ass comet is the logo.
Greetings one and all, and welcome to another episode of Tales from Vana'diel. Before we get stuck into today's episode, the majority of this information comes from a book called Life in Vana'diel. Unfortunately, this book was only available in Japanese, so for people like myself, I've had to rely on people on the internet like Elmer the Pointy on the Blue Garter forums, who over 10 years ago now shared information that was contained in this book. The work of those who have translated and shared its content is incredibly appreciated. Okay, so at the end of the last episode, for once, Vana'diel was left in relative peace. There were some skirmishes between Enlightened races and Beastmen tribes, but the Enlightened races were not at war with each other. But that all changed when young King Raygyug ascended to the throne. He wished to bring back the glory days of Sandoria and follow in the footsteps of War King Ashufage, who you'll know from the previous episode was an ambitious conqueror who made war, not peace. The young king set about forming a new and improved royal army, with a strict training regime for the Royal Knights of Sandoria. Just 4 years after becoming king and making his bold proclamation, Raygyug was ready to make his move. It started with a simple demand to the Republic of Bastok: return all the mines and lands back to Sandoria that had been sold to them by the aristocracy when Sandoria was in a recession. The Bastokan government refused, and immediately Sandoria issued a declaration of war. Leaving his brother, Prince Felanon, with the Temple Knights to protect the capital, Wolf King Raygyug leads his royal knights, along with their allies of the Tavnazia Knights, south for what will be the last great conflict between enlightened races. He did not mess around either. Bastok's fortifications in Valkrum, Konshat and Gustaberg quickly fell to an immense army of elven royal knights. Within just 7 months, they had marched from Sandoria in the north and taken control of the surrounding areas of Bastok in the south. The Republic's capital was surrounded. Due to the geographical location of Bastok, being surrounded in this manner meant supplies to the capital were running low. The president knew if the armies of Sandoria made a move on the capital itself, the war would be lost. So in order to buy time, President Shriver sent out messages to negotiate terms of surrender, without ever actually surrendering. After a month, King Raygyug had had enough of these negotiations, and finally declared a military strike on the capital would take place the following day. During the planning of their attack that evening, word reached them that an army of orcs had crossed the mountains and were invading the Norvallon region. The Royal Knights were left in a dilemma. Do they stay and risk losing their homeland, or do they return home to fight off the orc invaders? King Raygyug did not believe his brother was capable of holding off the orcish threat, and so plans were made for them to return and secure their homeland. However, in order to maintain their current strong position, they initiated plans to torch their siege weaponry and have the noticeable bonfires trick the Bastokans into believing they were still present and ready to invade. In Bastok, taking full advantage of their delay tactics, a plan was hatched by the key officer of the Republican Legion, Schultz. Using an inconspicuous merchant ship, General Fries led units of Bastok's army across the sea to Valkrum, and using the cover of darkness, the Iron Musketeers were able to establish their position on the western hills of the Konshat Highlands. Geiger mercenaries carried in cannons, which were placed in strategic positions. Just as Schultz had planned, the musketeers and geigers were ready and waiting to ambush the forces of Sandoria. King Rhaegyug had not gotten far before he discovered the news of the Orcish invaders was actually a host orchestrated by the Republic of Bastok.
Hold on, what?
Orcish invaders was actually a host
Did you say host or hoax? It sounded like host to me.
orchestrated by the Republic of Bastok. Not only that, but also learnt he and his men had been followed to the Kronstadt Highlands by the Republican forces. It was at this moment the Wolf King decided the time for battle was upon them.
– 2002 graphics, eh?
The Royal Knights sounded their horns to signal goblin mercenaries to attack. The Bastokan forces did not flinch and allowed the goblins to advance, right into range of their musket fire. Boom! A round of gunfire was swiftly followed by bolts from their crossbows, and countless goblins fell instantly. Those goblins that had not perished immediately fled from the battlefield. However, the goblins served as a distraction as the Royal Knight archers had moved into range. Valdemian gave the order, and the front line of Bastokan forces was obliterated by the cascading arrows. Bastok responded by signaling their Geiger mercenaries to attack. These huge beasts, standing at the height of over 3 human men, towered above the battlefield and launched huge boulders at the Elven army. This assault by the Geiger was complemented by cannon fire from the Gold Musketeers, and the Elven were getting decimated. From his balloon above, Schultz issued orders to send in the heavy infantry. These warriors wore heavy armour and, fortified by the Bard's advancing march, they moved forward into battle. Valdemian ordered the royal archers to retreat and sent in the royal spearmen in their place. These elven warriors, equipped with polearms, charged into battle, and the forces of Sandoria and Bastok violently collided. At first it was an evenly matched affair, but little by little the Bastokan forces were gaining the advantage. As the main forces fought, King Rhaegyug gathered some troops and moved to the right of the battlefield.
Real quick, see this depiction? I like that. I actually recently saw a YouTube video, like, I don't know, almost a month ago or so now, where it's from this channel that was basically dedicated to, like, uploading videos sort of debunking Hollywood movie stuff. And they had this historian, and he was, like, they had him commenting on scenes from Hollywood movies of, like, you know, movies like Troy, that depict, like, medieval warfare, or, you know, war from a long time ago where, you know, didn't have modern tech, right? And he mentioned that whole thing we just saw right there, where, like, the soldiers from both armies just fucking collide, and it turns into this mess where everybody's... As a kid, I was always like, how do you not hit your own friends when that happens? Like, if you just collided into each other like that, and just everybody just started wailing at each other, and everyone gets all mixed up, how are you not accidentally killing your friends or smacking them with your sword? Like, and thank God I finally saw this video where this guy who's actually an expert at, like, war, specifically war history, like conflict and all that stuff between different nations in the past. He was like, yeah, that's not at all how they fought. That's just Hollywood nonsense. So, because that's exactly what would happen. If all of the soldiers just fucking collide like that and just start going at each other, like, of course you're all gonna fucking start hitting your own comrades by accident. Like, how are you gonna tell what the hell is going on or who's who? If everybody just runs into each other. So that's just what they do for fucking Hollywood movies. It's just more Hollywood nonsense, basically. Just to make the battles look more dramatic and epic. Because if they actually showed a realistic depiction of how those armies fought back then, it would be really fucking boring. It's not at all like a modern, I guess, action movie or war movie or something where there's explosions everywhere and everything's going crazy. They literally were just trying to take the hype from those movies and put it into movies where it doesn't make sense, like old warfare movies. Like, for example, another thing that you see in those movies, you see this in Lord of the Rings, but to be fair, that's a fantasy. That's not meant to be based on real events. But you see it in other movies that are meant to be based on real events. The fiery catapult, where they shoot, like, a rock or something that's on fire, something that's on fire, and they shoot it through from a catapult into, like, a stronghold, an enemy stronghold. He said, no, they didn't do that. He said you would only set things on fire, like food stores and food supplies of the enemies. Where you wouldn't try to, like, set on fire, like, their entire city or something like that, or the flaming arrows were not also used as much as you'd think, based on what you see in the movies. And then there was like one specific scene, I think it's from the movie Troy, back in the 2000s, that he said was totally inspired from a modern-ish back then, modern-ish warfare movie. What was it? Saving Private Ryan. What was it? The Battle of the Invasion of Normandy, right? Where they get on the. I can't believe I'm forgetting this right now. Jesus Christ. Yeah, but basically, when they get on the beach and they get slaughtered, and it's just like this uphill battle, literally from the ocean trying to get on the beach. That whole invasion right there. And then they put a scene very similar to that in the movie Troy, I believe. And he was just like, it's totally just inspired from that. This did not happen. This, like, what did he call it? Aquatic or nautical invasions like this, where it turned into like a big conflict. So that wasn't really a thing back then. He said that didn't happen. He said this was just inspired by a World War II movie. So I just felt like commenting that just because we saw that right here in this video. With the way they collide right here, like this.
Charged into battle, and the forces of Sandoria and Bastark violently collided. At first it was an evenly matched affair, but little by little the Bastokan forces were gaining the advantage. As the main forces fought, King Rayjug gathered some troops and moved to the right of the battlefield. From here they launched a volley of arrows upon the advanced Bastokans, stopping them in their tracks. The king then went before his royal cavalry, unsheathed his sword and lifted it over his head, proclaiming, "I give my life for Altana." The soldiers responded in unison, "We give our lives for Altana."
I had to go back and check my facts. I was like, what was the invasion of Normandy, right? Yeah. Operation Overlord or whatever. That's what it was. I was like, how am I forgetting my fucking history? Jesus Christ.
Over his head, volley of arrows upon the advanced Bastokans, stopping them in their tracks. The king then went before his royal cavalry, unsheathed his sword and lifted it over his head, proclaiming, "I give my life for Altana." The soldiers responded in unison, "We give our lives for Altana." The king personally led the royal guard in their assault as they charged at the left wing of the Bastokan army. Progress was being made as the left wing of the Bastokan infantry crumbled. King Rayjug was then joined by Count Kafya, who led the reserve cavalry into battle. The reserve cavalry attempted to push forward towards the Gold Musketeers on the hill, while Rayjug led his men behind their encampment. The biggest problem for the Sandorian forces at this moment was the cannons. They knew if they couldn't destroy them, they would continue to be picked off from afar. From his balloon above the battle, Schultz issued the order to unleash the Galkan mercenaries. Armed with melee and magic, they were the strongest fighting force in the Republican Legion. Schultz was also in communication with Chief Greiner, who was rushing the Republican Legion's 3rd Division south through Valkrum. Upon the hills, a fierce battle continued to rage. Just as Count Kafyu directed, the cavalry struggled to destroy the cannons. However, they were facing the elite forces of the Iron and Gold Musketeers, not to mention the Geiger mercenaries as well, and gradually fatigue began to overcome them. So there are 3 points of battle going on at this time. Valdemian and his spearmen are slowly retreating from the Bastokan front line. King Rayjug is assaulting the right wing of the heavy infantry, but is soon being thwarted by Galkan mercenaries, and Count Kafyu and the battle on the hill with the Iron Musketeers is slowly drawing to a conclusion. Count Kafyu agrees to a temporary ceasefire in order for both sides to recover their dead and wounded. Fries, captain of the Gold Musketeers, takes advantage of this and, albeit being a bit of a dickish move, shoots Count Kafyu in the back of the head, killing him instantly. The Gold Musketeers follow suit and launch a huge offensive against the late Count's men. Count Kafyu's eldest son, having no means of defeating the enemy, had to abandon his father's corpse and fled down the hills with the reserve cavalry. They mounted chocobos and fled to the Pasha marshlands. King Rayjug and what remained of his men had shaken off the Galkan mercenaries and were in full flee mode. Valdemian and his spearmen, which is the bulk of the remaining Sandorian army, were then trapped. The 3rd Legion, who had been marching from Valkrum, arrived and cut off their escape. Schultz saw this from his balloon above and blew his whistle. This was the endgame he had planned from the beginning. Sure, there were some mishaps along the way, but the final results were there. The enemy had fallen victim to the battle plan known as Schultz's Cauldron. The Elven were now completely surrounded and contained by the Republican Legion. Witnessing the dilemma before him, Rygiug was resolute as he addressed his men. We knights have the strength to persevere. If we choose to flee, we may flee, thus staining the reputation of the Royal Knights. So we shall strike. We shall give our lives to rescue the spearmen, and tales of our great sacrifice shall be passed down throughout the generations. Rygiug and his men managed to pierce through the ironclad infantry and forge a path of escape through the north. The Royal Spearmen had all but collapsed, but a few Renmants managed to escape, while Thordemion bravely fought on to the bitter end. He fell on the battlefield while allowing his comrades to flee to safety. By the time they had reached the Thane Plateau, the king was left with but a few dozen soldiers. It is said that the king was only able to escape due to Schultz's advice that the Republican Legion not challenge those who are prepared to die. Some hours later, a proclamation of victory spread across the hills of Kronstadt Highlands. The Gold Musketeers, the two legions, and finally coming down from the skies, Schultz himself gathered together in jubilation. The battle was over, Bastok had won. This is where our story ends for today, as we're now entering the age of technology. I'll talk to you again soon, take care.
This has become a comfy story time stream. The guy has a nice voice, so it is actually kind of nice listening to him narrate all this stuff. You know, it's not bad. Oh, right, so now I have to add the last two videos, because of the user interface, I wasn't even able to. So 1 second. It's more entertaining than I thought it would be, too. Like I said, comfy, with his voice, and actually entertaining with the little bit of humor he puts in there. And the story is actually somewhat interesting. It has managed to keep my attention. So we'll go ahead and watch the last two videos now. I'm going to switch over to that playlist. And then that'll be that for this stream. I'll probably, okay, how long will we be going? Hour and 14? Yeah, like I said, it was going to be a shorter stream because of that. I'll go ahead and take a break, go do some other stuff, and come back to start Final Fantasy X too. But first, let's see, the last two videos. Oh wow, this next one's like 20 minutes. Yeah, then that'll be that then. But then the one after that's another 10 minutes. So it's like another 30 minutes. That'll be almost 2 hours. So I'll end the stream after this. This could also be an incomplete playlist too. It might just be like he just kind of gave up on the project after these last two episodes. I doubt there's a lot. They were meant to be the last two, but we'll see. That doesn't matter because it gives us enough of an idea of what Vana'diel is like, the history behind it, and you know the lore, the essential and general lore of Final Fantasy XI, which is kind of what it was after because I knew nothing about it, literally nothing before this. Just knew it was a old school grindy MMO that people even today still like.
Last time on Tales from Vana'diel, the forces of Sandoria moved south, destroying all who stood in their path. They surrounded the Republic of Bastok and demanded their surrender. However, on the Kronstadt Highlands, using the terrain to their advantage, the Republic of Bastok was able to defeat the mighty kingdom of Sandoria with their impressive military tactics and superior firepower. A helpless King Rygiug retreats back to the north, swearing revenge on the Bastokan people. Will he have his revenge, or will Bastok look to finally finish off Sandoria and conquer the lands for themselves? Find out on today's exciting episode of Tales from Vana'diel.
He committed to the Dragon Ball Z intro, dude.
What is going on, guys?
That was beautiful.
Welcome back to the Mog House, and yes, it is finally another episode of Tales from Vana'diel. That Dragon Ball Z inspired intro goes out to Andrigan, miss you buddy. Now, I actually recorded this episode a really long time ago, and according to the voiceover track, the edit was finalised in February 2019. That's almost a year ago, so I'm really sorry that this series has been on such a hiatus, but we're back, and there are...
That explains why this is the second to last episode. He eventually probably just burnt out and gave up on it. This was uploaded January 17th, and he just said he finished recording it February of 2019. Holy shit. He either gave up on it, or he's still working on it now, but it's like so slow going, he just... like... wow.
Many tales to tell. So let's pick up.
I know what that feels like, though.
Sandoria had its elven ass.
I don't want to talk over him. Just say I know what that feels like because I kind of did the same back in my Maple Story days when I had what was it, that Maple Story Boss Monster tournament thing I had going, dude. That was spread out over fucking years. I started getting lazy too with it.
Really sorry.
I totally get it.
A really long time ago, and according to the voiceover track, the edit was finalised in February 2019. That's almost a year ago, so I'm really sorry that this series has been on such a hiatus, but we're back, and there are many tales to tell. So let's pick up where we left off. Sandoria had its elven ass handed to it in the Second Battle of Kronstadt, being whooped by the forces of Bastok, and King Reiju returns to Sandoria and wants to raise an army in order to gain revenge. To tell the tale of what happens, we're going to follow the quest called A Timely Visit, which is quite possibly one of the greatest side quests in all of Final Fantasy XI. If you thought time travel was only introduced in Wings of the Goddess, you're in for a bit of a shock. We start in southern Sandoria with the lowly gate guard Derequin, who has heard that the Scepter
You can see the dialogue down there, but it's so small.
Royales has been stolen. Now, the Scepter Royales is bestowed to each king upon his coronation by the Papske. The Papske is the head of the Temple of Altana, which is kind of similar to the Pope in the Catholic Church. Now, in current day Vana'diel, the Temple Knights are theoretically under the command of the king, but any large-scale mobilization requires the Papske's permission, so the Scepter has massive importance to Sandoria. When approached by a Temple Knight, Derequin proposes indirectly that he may be able to assist in finding the Scepter, but the Knight thinks he's putting the player forward to help, and so you are instructed to head to Lethane Plateau in hot pursuit of the thief. At the bottom of a ravine, just outside Ordel's caves, we encounter another Temple Knight, who says the thief is just inside, but instead, a Royal Knight called Vjortul appears from the caves. Vjortul explains he is following orders of King Reiju and is on his way to take the Scepter Royales to the Chateau d'Orugi in order to deliver it to Prince Felanon. Believing Vjortul must have some involvement in the Scepter's theft, the Temple Knights arrest him and take him back to Sandoria. We return to Sandoria where Philoné, an elven resident of Sandoria, inquires with Derequin of the situation with the thief, instructing the adventurer that the thief is no criminal and must be helped. Her husband, Roido, a Bastokan Hume, excuses his wife's behaviour and takes her home. The player is then sent to Chateau d'Orugi to collect a reward, but that's not exactly what we get. Inside the chateau, we find that Halvar is interrogating Vjortul, who explains that 2 years after the Second Battle of Kronstadt, King Reiju raised an army in Lethane Plateau and was preparing to advance once more on the Republic of Bastok. However, while Reiju was out with the Royal Knights plotting war, his brother, Prince Felanon, mobilized the Temple Knights and took control of the city. Vjortul was to deliver the Scepter Royales to Prince Felanon on King Reiju's orders. Reiju would then abdicate the throne, providing the city was released from military control. But this is only half true, and we'll come to that. Halvar becomes incredibly impatient because everything he's hearing has happened 200 years ago, and demands Vjortul take his delusions elsewhere. But as he leaves, Vjortul reveals his full name to be Vjortul Kafio, which prompts even further outrage from Halvar. He knows that name to be a hero of Sandoria who ended the civil war between the Royal and Temple Knights 200 years ago. And Kafio may also be a familiar sounding surname for anyone who watched the last episode, but we'll also get to that as well. Confused as to where or even when he is, Vizhortal leaves. Vizhortal encounters Derequin, who explains to him that several years after the Second Battle of Kronstadt, Prince Felanon took control of Sandoria with the intention of making peace with Bastok. Of course, his brother King Rejug is intent on revenge, and it is this power struggle that leads to the Civil War. Vizhortal then asks about himself, and is stunned to discover that he is to become a hero of Sandoria during the time of the Civil War, and that even to this day he is one of the most famous people in their history. We then visit Philoné, whom we met earlier, and Vizhortal walks in believing it to be his house, and mistakes Philoné for his wife, Nafi. Roido, Philoné's husband, returns at this point, to the dismay of Vizhortal. He is utterly disgusted that a Hume Bastokan would dare set foot in the holy city of Sandoria, let alone some filthy Bastoka, that's his words not mine, be living in his very house. A confused Vizhortal takes his leave, contemplating where he is and if in fact it's possible that he's been catapulted through time. Roido now requests your help in recovering the Scepter Royales. Everyone wants a piece of this thing, it seems. But Philoné explains that her younger brother, Milisharal, whose name I am almost certainly butchering, was the one who stole the scepter, and that is why she approached us earlier thinking it was he who had been captured. She explains further that the Pierre Errant, the gemstone affixed to the scepter itself, contains a mysterious power, which is why the scepter carries such importance to Sandoria, and that's why it's passed down through generations of royalty. Roido plans to recover the scepter and return it to Chateau d'Origi to avoid Milisharal being captured or worse. At first, Philoné resists this plan, simply referring to the request of an ancestor, but is quickly convinced by her husband it is for the best, to aid her brother, and furthermore, to do so, Roido suggests that we will need the help of a seasoned knight. The adventurer and Roido talk to Derequin, but Derequin isn't exactly what Roido had hoped for when he said seasoned knight. But who should approach them? Vizhortal, who now declares himself as the ancient hero of Sandoria in the world of the future. He's beginning to believe he is destined to become this hero, that he has travelled through time, and he even begins to give himself superhero-like names such as Thunderbringer, but eventually settles on calling himself the Obsidian Bolt. Now accepting his hero role, Vizhortal offers to help with the plan to recover the Scepter Royales, but not without a few more jabs at Bastok, saying the people of Bastok are vulgar and uncouth and should be despised by any upstanding citizen of the noble Sandoria. Roido explains that Milisharal would have taken the scepter through Ramper's tomb and hidden it in Jugna Forest. Vizhortal agrees to accompany the Bastokan, well, providing that Roido doesn't actually speak to him. We arrive in Jugna Forest.
Oh, hey, thanks for the follow. Hold on, I know this is really loud compared to me, or almost at the same volume as me. Thanks for the follow, House Akarium. I appreciate that. I'm glad you're enjoying the comfy storytime stream over here for FF11 lore. And again, I gotta give credit where it's due. This is from the Mog House. Been watching these lore videos, Tales from Vana'diel, that they uploaded. And we saw the cinematic intro to FF11. That was my first time seeing that too. They did an amazingly good job with it. It was pretty long compared to what I thought it was going to be, but it was also really well done and epic. And yeah, like I said a few minutes ago too, the story's been a little backstory. The lore on the world of Vana'diel has actually been kind of interesting, so it's kept my attention more than I thought it would. So,
where Roido tries to
this is the most in-game footage we've seen so far
simply
too.
return the scepter, dump it somewhere in the chateau where it will be found without anyone getting into any further trouble. Milisharal states that he simply cannot do that. He has an oath to fulfill, and that Roido can't understand because he has no idea the responsibility the Kafio name entails. Milisharal explains he's already retrieved the scepter and leaves the scene. Vizhortal is now even more confused as to what on earth is going on, and once again insults Roido, calling him a miserable Bastoka, and is astounded that Roido would dare give him any orders. At this point, Roido essentially snaps. He's had enough of the discriminating remarks from an Elven using the name of a great Sandorian hero. Do you know what happened, Vizhortal? Roido baits the Elven. Do you know of the hero that died in battle trying to save the future of Sandoria and Bastok? That man was Vizhortal Kafio, the man who gave his life to protect Prince Felanon and his mission to forge a peace with Bastok. I don't care if you hate Bastokers or choose to call yourself Vizhortal, but I will not hear you sully the name of the great knight who died for peace of our two nations. Vizhortal scoffs. Death is a fate no knight fears. But he then asks Roido what he means by died for peace. Remember, Vizhortal is loyal to Rayjug, who wants another crack at battling with Bastok. He's not one for dying for the sake of peace. Roido explains that King Rayjug was unable to take the city back from Prince Felanon, and instead plotted to assassinate him. But the assassination was foiled by Vizhortal Kafio, who was mortally wounded, saving the prince. Stunned by this revelation, Vizhortal himself reveals he was headed to deliver the scepter to Prince Felanon and kill him while he was there. How could it be true? How could the plan have changed so dramatically? We return to Sandoria, to the home of Philoné and Roido, where Vizhortal explains that he had broken into the
And before his experience here in the future is what influences him to want peace when he goes back into the past, and that's why the history is like that. A self-fulfilling prophecy, time loop sort of thing, like we always see in time travel media.
Book vault and read pages of what happened to him 200
That's
years
my
ago,
guess.
and that what Roido had told him was true. He is to die saving Prince Felanon. He explains that the Kafio bloodline stems back to the founding of Sandoria. That's why he was entrusted with delivering the scepter, and that's why he should be trusted by the king to carry out the assassination. Vizhortal is now tortured by this knowledge, as he simply cannot work out why one minute he's going to kill the prince, and in the next he's saving him, and furthermore, he dies for the sake of peace between Sandoria and Bastok. None of that makes sense to him. At this point, Roido returns home, explaining the Temple Knights have picked up the trail of Milisharal. They haven't caught him yet, but they know he will be headed to Ordell's caves in order to carry out his oath. Roido pleads with Vizhortal for aid, but once more, Vizhortal snubs Roido simply for being Bastokan. Roido questions him as to why he must hate Bastok so much, and it is then revealed that Vizhortal's father was killed in the Second Battle of Kronstadt. Not only that, in the last video I explained that during the battle a ceasefire was called so the two nations could recover their dead, and it was Vizhortal's father, the late Count Kafio, that was shot in the back of the head by Freese during the ceasefire. Vizhortal holds Bastok responsible for the deaths of everyone he holds dear. Bastok is the ultimate enemy to him. Philoné tries to reason with him. Bastok essentially lost as much as Sandoria. Both sides lost loved ones. The thing he should hate is war itself, and then she makes one key statement that hits home with Vizhortal. Do you not find it strange? We are all children of Altana, and yet there is hostility and conflict among us. Nafi, Vizhortal's wife, whom Philoné resembles, once asked him, why must the people of Sandoria and Bastok despise each other, even though we are all children of Altana? Philoné explains that she had previously lived in Bastok and had experienced hatred from those who saw Elvens as the enemy, but there were also kind and caring souls like Roido who treated her as an equal. She believes that all races should be free from the barriers of prejudice and ignorance, and that Vizhortal himself can also find peace. Just outside Ordell's caves, the Temple Knights prepare to apprehend Milisharal. However, Vizhortal appears from the caves and tells them that the thief has escaped through another exit, and so the Temple Knights leave to investigate. Vizhortal recognizes where they are, and then discovers Milisharal, who hands in the Scepter Royales. He reveals he is to give the scepter to the first knight he meets on this day, at this time, in this place, and the person that asked him to do it is Vizhortal Kafio. He explains the oath was made to a distant ancestor and then passed down from generation to generation. It's at this moment that Vizhortal realizes that the boy in front of him and his sister Philoné must be his descendants of the Kafio family. and that he would need to be given the scepter at this precise moment in order to use the Pierre Errant gemstone within it and travel back to his own time. The Temple Knights are now fast approaching and Vjortul tells them to flee. Roido, however, insists on staying in order to at the very least stall the Knights so that Milicharal can escape. He explains he does this because he does not care about race or bloodline, he simply needs to protect his family. He then states to Vjortul, Bastok, Sandoria, none of that is important. Don't you understand? Surely you have someone you would die to protect, no matter the consequences. Vjortul knows now what he must do, and explains he can save everyone. Vjortul tells Roido that he realises the error of his ways, that Bestokers are not to be so easily dismissed, and that there is something to Prince Felanon's reasoning, and that he cannot allow the prince to be assassinated. He says, it is just like last time, these caves are responding in some way to the Pierre Errant. Did you know that this place was once known as the Shrine of Endless Travels? There is nothing to fear. Please let Philoné know that I need no thanks. I already have my reward. I am the Obsidian Bolt. Such deeds are my reason for living. And with that, Vjortul vanishes, and the scepter is now laying on the ground. Unfortunately, Milicharal is still apprehended for his part in the theft of the scepter, and is taken away by the Temple Knights. Back in Sandoria, Roido is apologising to Philoné for failing to protect her brother, when her brother rushes in exclaiming that Vjortul was in fact the actual Vjortul Cafio of legend. Halvar arrives with a sealed letter written by Prince Felanon himself that has been passed down through the royal family with orders for it to be opened this year. The letter states that Milicharal would steal the Scepter Royales, but neither he or those that accompanied him are to be charged with any crime, as requested by Vjortul Cafio. It was written that these people would sustain the good relationships between Bastok and Sandoria. The will of Prince Felanon, a direct ancestor of the current royal family, is incontestable, meaning everyone gets off scot-free. Halvar then tells them of the Pierre Errant, the gemstone within the Scepter Royales. Following Vjortul's actions and the prevention of Prince Felanon's assassination, the prince saw a vision of the future within the gemstone where the two nations were finally at peace. Prince Felanon would then go on to surrender to King Rayzhug and give him back control of the city, under the condition that the Temple Knights would not be held responsible for taking over the capital. The prince was then imprisoned in Bostono-Ubele, as it was an official stance that the blood of the royal family must never be spilt no matter the crime. 3 years later he escaped, which sparks a huge civil war between the Temple Knights and the Royal Knights that lasts for 100 years. But what of Vjortul himself? Well, Halvar explains that he dies while saving the prince, but he notes it's strange that his grave has never been found. Saving the prince would surely have earned him a suitably resplendent tomb. Halvar's also impressed that the bloodline of Vjortul is still flourishing within the capital city today, but Philoné remarks that until recently, they were residents of Bastok and had been for several generations. Halvar then has a brainwave.
I think my man here just got like a fucking tell or a whisper from another player right there.
Literature that
Text
tells
box.
of a knight who organised Prince Felanon's escape, and later took refuge in Bastok. And apparently, this knight signed his name as, you guessed it, the Obsidian Bolt. So the ultimate hater of Bastok ended up living out his final days in the city. So there you have it, an absolute cracker of a quest. Tons of lore and history in it, and whoever was responsible for writing that storyline did an amazing job. There is so much to it, there's so many themes and depth, it's just so well written, it's amazing, and if you haven't done...
That is a side quest? Holy shit, dude, that was, classic time loop storyline, but like he said, also just very well written and well done with like everything that it explores. The racial prejudice and everything else, like it's, wow. For a side quest, holy shit, they did a good job.
And already, you should go out of your way to do it because it's fantastic. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one, but for now, take care.
20-minute video, I forgot how loud this was. Here, I'll lower it. For headphone users. Jesus. I like that this particular episode got that Dragon Ball Z style intro though. That was pretty good. It's probably the most entertaining episode so far.
In the last episode, we looked at the repercussions from the Second Battle of Kronstadt for the losers Sandoria. So now I want to talk about what happened next for the victors, the Republic of Bastok. For the first time in this series, Bastok is the military powerhouse of Vana'diel. And so will they follow their predecessors in this role to try and conquer the lands as Windurst and Sandoria did before them, or will a greater threat emerge? Find out on today's episode of Tales from Vana'diel.
I know that was late, but... Oops, I accidentally clicked.
So we pick up with the Republic of Bastok having achieved a great victory in the Second Battle of Kronstadt. They fortify their defences in preparation for the expected return of Sandoria, but as we know from the last episode, Sandoria is too busy being at war with itself to launch a revenge-fuel assault on Bastok. So instead, while at peace, Bastok expands its military and the 4th Republican Legion is established. They know they had a terrain advantage in the last battle, but if Sandoria had chosen to attack the capital when it had a chance, they would have easily lost. But all the gunpowder and military tactics in Vana'diel couldn't prepare them for what they were about to face. A simple Hume traveller arrives at Bastok from a foreign country to stay at an inn on Gold Street. He sat down for a spot of lunch when, without warning, his face fell into his pebble soup and he died on the spot. Following what we can only imagine was some sort of basic post-mortem, the Hume's body was discovered to be covered in strange blotches. As he was a traveller, little thought or concern was given to this, and he was put to rest and his corpse was buried. However, after a week or so had passed, the entire staff of that inn was found dead, each with the same blotches covering their bodies. And so began the Bastokan Blight, a terrible plague with an incredibly high mortality rate. At this point in time, Bastok's healing was primarily administered in the form of herbs, medicines and holy waters handed out by priests. The Bastokan government had to employ white mages from overseas as the capital had almost none of its own, but they couldn't move fast enough. The damage was already done. The plague was out of control and it could not be stopped. The streets were lined with corpses. The few Galkan undertakers that worked in the city were almost unable to keep up with the funeral services. The priests and the monks were confronted. The city demanded an explanation, some sort of reason for this devastation. The Republic of Bastok was now ruled by panic and despair. On top of this, the plague itself only appeared to affect the Humes, which invoked all these crazy theories and accusations throughout the city. Was this the result of an evil incantation from a Galkan wizard, a new biological weapon of the goblins, or did the Quiddav send poison down through the Palborough mines? This city, united following its recent military victory, was on the brink of being defeated by an enemy that can't be bargained with, it can't be reasoned with, that doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and one that absolutely will not stop ever until everyone in its path is dead. Yes, I did just paraphrase Carl Reese from Terminator, and I'm not remotely sorry.
I love it.
So the city is in complete disarray, and the odd, almost cult-like culture starts to take hold of the city, and the verses of the ancient Bastokan Song of the Damned are taken up by the masses. Come now and dance with these bones, spin and turn in life and in death. Pauper, sage, even the nobleman knows, they are all in the end of life bereft. Savour now, doomed fool, and make merry this night. Come now and dance with these bones. sing and croon in life and in death. Old hag, young beauty, even the sweet child knows. In time a bleached skull is all will be left. Savour now, doomed fool, and make merry this night. This verse in particular rose to prominence as the plague ravaged the Republic. Using magic to animate corpses, groups of grieving and hopeless people would fill the streets in processions of living and dead, booming in chorus as they danced the Totentans in a form of morbid catharsis.
Jesus.
Just the thought of hundreds of human remains being walked down the streets as some sort of expressionless puppets just creeps me out a bit. To begin with, the government let these processions of the dead and the cult-like chanting slide. They were desperately trying to quarantine the plague at the time, so they didn't have the manpower to stop the masses, nor, I think, did they want to anger them further and start a full-blown civil war. However, their hand was forced when the dancing of the Totentans led to no small number of soldiers to neglect their posts. Remember, Bastok was fortifying its defences and building its military when the plague struck. If Sandoria were to return now, they would be in serious trouble. So a series of prohibitions was promptly issued with unforeseen but kind of predictable results. An air of insurgency and rebellion swept the people, as dancing crowds began to take to the streets even when the sun was still high in the sky. President Wilhelm was left with no recourse but to declare a state of emergency and mobilise the Republic's main garrison of Galkan troops against the citizenry to suppress the escalating chaos, which in hindsight is probably not the best idea. When rumours are out there that the Galkers are trying to wipe out the Humes, this probably isn't the smartest course of action. Bastok is now on the edge of collapse. Back in those days, mountain folk from the Gustberg regions would travel to the city to peddle medicinal herbs. Among these tribes are some of the earliest instances of dancers, the job available to the players of the game. Without a thought of the danger to themselves, despite the obvious risk of contracting the plague themselves, they would roam the city streets and visit military barracks displaying a dance of their own, the Kriegstanz. It was an aggressive yet graceful traditional dance of the tribes. The majestic rhythms pounded out by these confident women and their motions full of life captivated observers instantaneously, and it was not long before the morose, morbid Totentans rituals faded away as quickly as they had come. People stopped with these morbid chants of the Song of the Damned and gone with the processions of the dead. The dancers had given the city hope, and tensions finally eased, and eventually a cure was found for the plague. Some years later, the significant role that the dancers played in the defeat of the deadly epidemic, which claimed so many Bastokan lives, was commemorated by the president in a now famous speech. Though none can deny the scientific strides made by our great alchemists in curing this foul plague, praise is due also to those fearless masters of dance who came to us in our most dire hour, for it was their impassioned artistry that delivered us from the tyranny of this most lethal of epidemics, and the terror which had gripped our very hearts. And so it was with that the dancers came to be credited with ending the Bastokan Blight. In the wake of its success and popularity during the Blight, the Kriegstanz became a well-established school of dance, the study of which was such a grueling task that finding successors to carry on the tradition became quite a chore in its own right. And it is not without some hint of irony that the second coming of the dancers would require a tragedy on the scale of the Crystal War, with the fate of Bastok in the balance to bring it about. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I think next time we should chat about our Tarot and Mythothrens over in Windurst, as we've not discussed them for a long while. But until then, take care.
As far as I know, though, there is no next time. Because that's it. That's the end of this playlist. If he added any more videos, he probably didn't add them to the playlist yet. He might not. But this is February 18th of... well, it's now almost 2 years ago. Because right now it's January 31st of 2022. Damn, time flies. But So yeah, at least that gave us a gist of the kind of shit that's been going down in Vana'diel. All the stuff that's going on. Surprised to hear that Totentanz was already present in FF11 when FF14 introduced into its own story. Into its story when Dancer was added to the game. That was fascinating. That was a top comment there. And yeah, like I think I said that at the beginning of the stream, it's interesting how FF14 feels like a remake of FF11, honestly. With so many similarities between the races at least. And some of the lore, but obviously not all of it. It's almost like they kind of just change the names around for some things. But in other ways, it's completely different, of course. And now I can actually say that with confidence, knowing more of the FF11's backstory. So that was interesting. That's it for this comfy story time stream, I guess. I wanted to at least, because I knew I was never going to play Final Fantasy XI, especially on stream. But I wanted to at least acknowledge it. It's still part of the mainline Final Fantasy series, and it had its massive success like all the other games. But again, in terms of Square Enix's history, it is the part where they sort of peaked because, for a little while, because they got so confident, we'll say to be nice about it, in the success of Final Fantasy XI that they just got complacent afterwards and didn't put in as much effort on FF12 and 13 because they were like, it's going to sell on the brand name alone. Which is why 13 in particular is very infamous amongst the community. They're just like, oh my god, that game is, yikes. But then 14 1.0 dethroned it. And people were like, Jesus Christ, what the hell is this? Like I said, most of this I got from the documentary for 14. And how they turned things around from 14 1.0 into Realm Reborn and made it what it is today. So, yeah, it started with, I guess, the success of 11 making them become complacent. And that's what led to that disaster, known as FF14 1.0. That's interesting. So yeah, like I said, this was basically me acknowledging FF11. I didn't want to just skip over it. I didn't want to just go from FF10 to 10.2 and then 12 and pretend that 11 didn't exist. I can't do that. So there we go. A nice, just under 2 hour stream dedicated to FF11. Giving it a shout out for being what it was, being what it still is today. Servers are still up and people still play it, still like it. And yeah, when I come back next time, we'll go ahead and get started on FF10 too. And then the roadmap from there is after 10.2 will be 12, and then we'll come back to YouTube to watch the 13 series. At least part 1 and 2 of FF13 was before FF14 1.0, so it'll be those two parts of FF13 1 and 2, and then 14 1.0, followed by Realm Reborn. And then I think there was, I saved a video, an old video somebody uploaded of the FF13 crossover event with 14 Realm Reborn. And that leads straight into Lightning Returns, FF13. And then after that it's, I think, should be, because I'm going by release order, so you guys know why I'm doing it this way. And then it should be Heavensward, and I believe just before Stormblood was FF15. And then from there it becomes pretty linear. Just Stormblood, Shadowbringers, and finally Endwalker. So that's the roadmap. Still a long way to go. Even just listing it out just now took a minute. But that's pretty much what's coming up next. But that's it for me for now, for this stream. So thank you all who joined me for this little storytime stream. This comfy storytime stream, and hope you enjoyed the lore of Vana'diel and FF11. I certainly liked it more than I thought I would. I thought I was going to zone out and probably just get bored halfway through this, but no. The videos were short and sweet enough that I was actually able to tolerate it, and it was actually kind of interesting. And I said pandemic, I meant to say epidemic. I'm so used to saying pandemic now thanks to what's happening IRL. But it was basically just an epidemic because it only affected one race of people, this last episode we saw. And it was just that one town. It didn't get big enough to be classified as a pandemic, but anyway, yeah, that's it. So I appreciate all the likes, subscribes, and follows on Twitch and YouTube. To everyone who did follow, like, and subscribe, appreciate that, and I hope you enjoyed this content. Like I said, I'll be back for more later, probably today. Another 2 hours, it'll be FF10-2, and until then, please take care of yourselves, look after each other, stay safe out there, And please have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. And until next time, peace. Oh yeah, I'll get the outro music. Don't worry. I'll get the outro music.